The idea that Bitcoin, a decentralized peer-to-peer digital currency, was created by the government might sound absurd at first glance. After all, Bitcoin is often hailed as the ultimate tool for financial freedom, designed to bypass the traditional banking system and give power back to the people. But what if that's exactly what they want you to believe? What if Bitcoin was never meant to liberate us from centralized control, but was actually a government project all along, cleverly disguised as a decentralized revolution? This theory, while controversial, has been gaining traction in certain circles, and the implications are downright chilling. Let's take a step back. Bitcoin was introduced in 2009 by a mysterious figure or group, known only as Satoshi Nakamoto. To this day, no one knows who Satoshi really is, and despite numerous investigations, the identity remains a closely guarded secret. Supporters of the theory that Bitcoin was created by the government point to this anonymity as their first red flag. In a world where privacy is increasingly rare and where governments excel at surveillance, it seems suspicious that Satoshi has managed to stay hidden for so long. Could it be that Satoshi isn't a renegade cryptographer or a genius developer, but rather a front for a government operation? One of the central ideas behind this theory is that Bitcoin is a Trojan horse, a tool created by government agencies to lure people into adopting a digital currency system, one that can be tracked, monitored, and controlled. Think about it. Bitcoin operates on a public ledger known as the blockchain. Every transaction ever made using Bitcoin is recorded on this ledger, and while users' identities are hidden behind cryptographic addresses, these addresses can still be traced. Over time, patterns emerge, and with enough data, it's possible to link Bitcoin addresses back to real individuals. In short, Bitcoin may not be as anonymous as people think. Some theorists suggest that Bitcoin's public ledger is the perfect surveillance tool for governments. By encouraging people to use Bitcoin, authorities could gather detailed information about people's financial habits, where they spend their money, and even with whom they interact financially. Unlike cash transactions, which leave no digital trace, Bitcoin creates a permanent record of every exchange. And while this might be a selling point for transparency advocates, it also provides an ideal framework for financial surveillance. The timing of Bitcoin's creation is another point often raised by believers in this theory. Bitcoin emerged in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, a time when trust in banks and governments was at an all-time low. People were desperate for alternatives to the traditional financial system, and Bitcoin appeared like a beacon of hope, promising financial independence and freedom from the corrupt institutions that had just plunged the world into recession. But what if Bitcoin's launch wasn't a coincidence? What if it was a carefully calculated move to channel that growing distrust into a system that governments could ultimately control? The theory suggests that by offering the illusion of decentralization, governments could allow citizens to feel as though they were escaping the system, while in reality, they were simply adopting a new system with a different kind of control. Think about it. If governments had openly proposed a fully digital currency, the public would have been suspicious and resistant. But by disguising it as a grassroots movement driven by mysterious figures like Satoshi, they could quietly build support and lure millions of people into this new financial framework. Moreover, Bitcoin's cryptographic design and emphasis on decentralization are not as foolproof as they seem. As the popularity of Bitcoin has grown, so too has the concentration of power among certain key players. Large mining pools now control much of the network's computational power, and many of these pools are based in countries with strong government oversight, such as China. Some conspiracy theorists argue that these mining pools could be manipulated or even directly controlled by government agencies, ensuring that the very infrastructure of Bitcoin remains under state control. Furthermore, the development of regulatory frameworks around cryptocurrency may play into this theory. Governments worldwide have been gradually introducing laws and regulations to monitor and control the use of cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin's public ledger makes it easier for them to enforce these regulations. If Bitcoin were truly a tool of financial freedom, some argue, wouldn't governments be more concerned about its potential to undermine their authority? Instead, they seem to be embracing Bitcoin with open arms, integrating it into existing financial systems while still exerting control through regulations. In the next part of this theory, we'll dive even deeper into the idea that Bitcoin might have been part of a much larger plan from the beginning. Could it be that Bitcoin is the first step toward a global, government-controlled digital currency? A currency that operates entirely in the digital space, erasing cash and physical transactions altogether, giving governments total control over every financial interaction. What if Bitcoin is just the first step in a larger strategy to create a global, government-controlled digital currency? The theory gets even more intriguing when you consider how governments worldwide have been steadily moving towards the elimination of cash. Could Bitcoin have been a trial run, a test bed for what's to come? A future where every financial transaction is digital, trackable, and ultimately controllable? One of the most compelling arguments in favor of this theory is the rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. In recent years, we've seen multiple governments, including China, the European Union, and the United States, announce plans to develop their own digital currencies. These CBDCs would operate much like Bitcoin, using blockchain technology to track every transaction. But unlike Bitcoin, which is decentralized, at least in theory, these currencies would be fully controlled by central authorities. With CBDCs, governments could monitor and regulate every aspect of the economy in real time. This raises the question, was Bitcoin simply the prototype? Did governments use Bitcoin to get people comfortable with the idea of digital currencies, allowing them to experiment with the technology before rolling out their own, more centralized versions? After all, Bitcoin introduced blockchain technology to the masses, making it easier for governments to justify the transition to CBDCs by pointing to Bitcoin's success. If people are already accustomed to using a digital currency like Bitcoin, the leap to a government-backed digital currency doesn't seem so far-fetched. But here's where the theory takes an even darker turn. With a government-controlled digital currency, there would be no room for privacy. Every single transaction could be monitored, taxed, and potentially even blocked by the authorities. Think about the implications. If all financial activity is digital, governments could freeze your funds with the click of a button, track your purchases to influence your behavior, or even prevent you from buying certain products. The level of control would be unprecedented. And Bitcoin, well, it might have been the gateway drug that got us all hooked on the convenience of digital transactions without realizing the dangers of total financial surveillance. This is where some conspiracy theorists believe that the idea of Satoshi Nakamoto as a mysterious, anonymous figure might have been a strategic move. By creating an enigmatic origin story for Bitcoin, the government could distance itself from the currency, making it appear as though it were a decentralized grassroots initiative. This would make people far more likely to adopt it. If Bitcoin had been introduced by a government directly, it would have faced immediate skepticism, especially from libertarians, tech enthusiasts, and privacy advocates, the very groups who have embraced it the most. The theory suggests that governments played a long game. They let Bitcoin thrive in the wild, allowing early adopters to build its infrastructure, promote it as the currency of the future, and test its use on a global scale. But now that Bitcoin is firmly entrenched in the financial world, governments can slowly step in and integrate their own systems into the same framework. They can regulate the exchanges, require identity verification, and introduce taxes on cryptocurrency transactions. In this way, Bitcoin might have been a Trojan horse, designed to lure us into a financial system that's ultimately more centralized and controllable than anything we've seen before. Let's not forget the power that governments hold over the internet, which is where Bitcoin lives. If Bitcoin truly were a decentralized, uncontrollable threat to governments, why hasn't there been more aggressive opposition to it? If Bitcoin were a real threat, they could have taken steps to block its use or undermine its infrastructure. Instead, we've seen the opposite, governments introducing regulations that legitimize cryptocurrency and allow it to thrive within controlled environments. Could this be part of the plan? Another interesting angle to consider is how Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have been embraced by the financial elite. Major banks, hedge funds, and even governments have started investing in Bitcoin. And we're seeing institutional money flood into the cryptocurrency space. What if this isn't a sign of Bitcoin's success as an anti-establishment tool, but rather proof that it was never truly meant to be anti-establishment at all? The very systems that Bitcoin was supposed to disrupt are now integrating it into their financial models, further fueling the idea that Bitcoin is part of a broader, government-orchestrated plan. Then there's the issue of how Bitcoin could pave the way for something even more controlling, a cashless society. Governments and corporations have long been pushing for the end of cash, citing convenience, security, and the fight against criminal activity as reasons to go fully digital. Bitcoin, with its digital-only nature, could be seen as a stepping stone toward this future. By normalizing the idea of digital currencies, Bitcoin has softened public resistance to the notion of a completely cashless economy, one where every transaction is monitored and controlled by a central authority. In a world without cash, governments could have complete control over financial freedom. Want to protest against the government? Your digital funds could be frozen. Want to make a purchase that doesn't align with the government's values or policies? Your transaction could be blocked. A fully digital, government-controlled currency would give authorities an unprecedented level of control over both economic activity and individual freedom. Bitcoin, according to the theory, may have been the first step in acclimating us to this new reality. So, what's the end game here? If Bitcoin truly was created or co-opted by governments, it's possible that the ultimate goal is to transition us into a new financial era, one where governments have total control over the economy through digital currencies. Bitcoin, in this scenario, was simply the bait. It got us excited about the idea of digital currency, made us believe in the dream of financial independence, and now that we're fully invested, the trap can be sprung with CBDCs and a fully digital, cashless society. While this theory remains speculative, it raises important questions about the true origins of Bitcoin and the future of digital currencies. Is Bitcoin the liberating, decentralized force it claims to be, or is it part of a much larger scheme to centralize control over global finances? One thing's for sure, whether Bitcoin was created by the government or not, it has forever changed the way we think about money, freedom, and power.